What's going on, everybody? Tim from Tirfon Orbital. So I'm going to do a quick demo walkthrough video for a commission that I wrapped up late last week. This is for a DarkSaber from Malibu Props. Malibu Props did this run a year ago now, I think it is. They started the run on the RPF forum. So this particular hilt has its own intricacies. A lot of the DarkSabers, they have an interesting speaker setup because you're working with a hilt that does not have a round internal diameter. It's typically like an oval shaped inner diameter. So what we see a lot of times is, depending on space, is smaller speakers, thinner speakers, different resonance. So there are different intricacies, like I said, with this particular hilt. I've done one of these. I did one like 6 months ago. I did an install on one. What I really like about the Malibu DarkSaber is the grip. I'm not quite sure what kind of anodize they used on the aluminum or what kind of treatment or paint is on it, but the grip to me feels really robust and unique, right? I am not a DarkSaber aficionado. I am not a pro when it comes to the dark sword or the DarkSaber. I've never really liked the design of this hilt, to be quite frank and honest with you. But yeah, this particular one, I really like the grip. So we don't need to go over the chassis design. This chassis was designed by Sam over at Shapeways Props. So made my job a lot easier. Designing a chassis for an oval hilt is not always easy. So I really like Sam's approach to the chassis on this design. So we'll talk about that a little bit. We'll talk about how to use it, and we'll do a demo, and we'll be on our way, right? So let's come up top. So here it is. This is the DarkSaber by Malibu Props. It is a really cool looking saber. And again, so this grip, I can't really tell. I mean, it is an aluminum hilt, right? But the upper ribbed section, it feels like it's almost, I want to say it almost feels like it's rubberized. It's not like, it's unique, super unique feel to this hilt, right? So really simple setup, okay? So the pommel is held in place with a set screw that goes in through the bottom here. And it comes off that way. We've got a single button setup. This is from a request by the client was to do a lit button, right? So this is a low profile 8mm momentary switch from KR Sabers. I got this from Cal over at KR Sabers. It's lit white, and that's it, right? Really quick and simple rundown on the hilt itself. So let's talk about how to use this guy. Okay, so at the bottom here in the pommel, there is a hex set screw. So you want to unscrew that. I already had it loose for the video. And that's how your pommel comes off. All right, so this is what I was mentioning. So with this particular build, this particular chassis, we do have a thin 28mm speaker for this one, right? The chassis itself is loose. So to the client, so typically you can do regarding the switch, right? So typically you can put a tactile switch on board the chassis. That way the whole chassis will come out. Because we did a lit momentary switch here, this switch is still wired up to the chassis. So do not pull this chassis all the way out. Then you're going to disconnect the leads from that switch, and it's going to be a little bit of a pain to wire them up, right? So the chassis does slide, but I would just leave it pressed all of the way into the hilt, right? Because we cannot remove this chassis all of the way, I did set this up with a recharge port. So there's a charge port here. This is how you charge your lightsaber. There is a 16650 internal battery in here. Technically the battery is removable, but because that switch is wired up, you can't remove the chassis. So you need to charge through that recharge port. There is also a kill switch to turn your hilt on and off. Proffieboard sits around back, and there's plenty of room to get at your SD card and your USB port, okay? So let's talk about how to use it. So you hit that kill switch, turns the hilt on. When putting the pommel in, this is how I have been doing it. So you want to take that long set screw, make sure it's going in the hole in that chassis, and then you tighten that set screw. Make sure the pommel is all the way in, and then tighten that set screw. Yeah. Okay. So that's it. So Devin Clark is the one who made the blade for this particular run, and I do believe that he made the blade plugs for this as well. They're a little flimsy, in my opinion. I'm not quite sure why they were done this way. However, they do come out, okay? And you can they can be held in place with those set screws if you want to leave it in there, okay? So let's come down to the bottom. So this blade was done by Devin Clark over at the Saber Trade, and they were included in this run. So this is very important. Devin has marked at the base of this blade where the positive is. So that red mark, that's the positive lead for the blade. You want to make sure you're putting your blade in the correct orientation. Otherwise, you can burn out not only... Well, you could burn out the blade. You could ruin the blade that way. So if you're looking at the hilt like this, and this guard is at the bottom, I kind of call this the peak of the hilt. That peak is where your positive will be going. So you take the red part, make sure that's facing up towards the peak, or the cutting edge. I mean, kind of imagine it that way. That's the cutting edge. It's the same where the cutting edge of this blade is, and you just slide that all of the way in, okay? So once you get your blade in, there are 4 set screws around that base of the blade. Let's get my set screw, my key here, Allen key. There are 4 screws, set screws. So you want to make sure, what I do is I tighten each one a little bit. I don't tighten them down all the way. That way they're all pressing in and securing all at the same time and in the same place. I'm only going to do 2 for the demo here, but there are 4 of them. So once you've got all your set screws in, it's 1 tap of the main button to activate the blade. Let's see what else we've got on here. So I did mostly DarkSaber fonts.
Dark sword. Just a simple wonder.
It can do multiple colors, so I've written in a couple of different colors in the config. Let's see what else. We'll do one more. There's a red one. Twist to activate, twist to deactivate are all on. So one thing that I noticed, right, about the Malibu DarkSaber, and something that I touched on in my last install on one of these, it's just my only concern, or the only thing I notice is the sound ventilation. We've got a very thin profile speaker in there, so that you're already limited by the sound output on that. So yeah, it's just one of the caveats. Having a smaller or a thinner speaker in there, you're limited by the amount of sound output. So it's just something that I noticed. Really, really fantastically made hilt though, and again, I really love the feeling of that grip. And the blade from Devin is really, really cool too. So that's it. If anyone has any questions about this particular install, please don't be a stranger to the client. Thank you very much for your patience in your business. And with that being said, may the force be with you always. Thanks for watching, everybody.